The IMF says global trade ties resemble the Cold War era, and the economic fallout from years of strained relations between China and the West could worsen the world economy if it continues. Let's take a closer look at the trade and tech wars between the world's two major economies. Trade wars started during Donald Trump's first term in office between 2017 and 2021, and they have continued under Joe Biden. China's President Xi Jinping calls America's export controls as chokehold technologies. The struggle is reshaping relationships and supply chains the world over. And the costs are mounting. Estimates vary, but the IMF reckons the elimination of high-tech trade across rival blocs could cost as much as 1.2% of global GDP each year, about $1 trillion. The next stage of the tech war will likely play out in chip making. It creates the world's information processing infrastructure, including chips that trains and runs artificial intelligence software. Any degree of Chinese control over the production of chips is unacceptable to America. And now, from Trump to Biden and beyond, the Biden administration's approach to China, trade and technology has been different than former President Donald Trump's, and it has been less disruptive. Now, all eyes are on the upcoming US elections, as a more aggressive trade and tech wars may lead to worse outcomes for America, China, and the world. Now, for more on this, let's bring in Guido Cossi. He is a professor of macroeconomics at the HSG's School of Economics and Political Science. Professor, a pleasure having you with us on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's been said by the IMF that global trade ties now resemble the Cold War era. Is that a bit of a stretch, or do you agree?
My opinion, it is a bit of a stretch. There is no arms race at the moment. There is no military threat. It is true that recently the argument that started with Donald Trump with unfair practices by China got with Joe Biden more politicized. Take, for example, his famous Munich speech about the competition between democracies and authorities. So there is an element of existential difference between China and the United States. However, China is totally different from Russia. It doesn't have all these raw materials base, and it's not really interested in expansion at all. I think it's important to restore trade. So maybe this moment of redefinition of the balance could discipline China in terms of fairness in trade and in production, and set the new equilibrium on a better basis. Of course, this is an election year, so both presidents are exaggerating a little bit, but still, I think it's definitely not a Cold War situation.
Interesting. I do want to ask you a question on, and I want to make an example on steel, but it doesn't have to be just the steel imports. The Biden administration has called for tripling tariffs on Chinese steel. For instance, former President Donald Trump has said he would raise tariffs by 60% on Chinese goods. Now, in general, do these tariffs really work when it comes to trade, but not just trade, when it comes to the domestic economy of certain nations, for example, the US and China in this case?
Well, clearly they are trying to attract voters, so workers are concerned. They fear Chinese competition, so this is always a good argument. However, the history of sanctions shows that they don't work so much, actually. And overall, by reducing the possibility of trade, it is as if you were reducing the possibility of innovation, because you are relying on more expensive products that eventually have a ripple effect on inflation and on the overall economy in general.
One last point on China. The West, as you said, really fears the Chinese competition when it comes to EVs, but also when it comes to AI, chip making, energy, sustainable energy, for example. Where do we stand in the so-called chip war? And does China and Taiwan together really have the upper hand? What do you predict will happen in that sector on that front?
Well, it's true that the Western world lost some competition there, and it's important to reactivate because in general tariffs or trade restrictions are not good. However, with innovative sectors, sometimes it's important to stimulate demand for the domestic firms, and I think the United States are very committed to regain competition. On the other side, China, Taiwan, that's right. But at the moment, Taiwan is better in this job. And even though China is trying to poach engineers from the SCMC or trying to steal some secrets, it's also true that the West is naturally more allied to Taiwan. So I think ties with the West are stronger in this dimension.
That's really, really interesting content. Professor Guido Crossi, thank you very much for being with us today.
You're welcome.